"Excuse me, you can't access those terminals without supervision." The words came sharp and practiced from Marcus Chun, Senior Network Administrator at Apex Defense Technologies. His security badge gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of Server Room C, positioned precisely where company protocol demanded it be visible at all times. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." She didn't look up from the workstation where her fingers moved across the keyboard with methodical precision. The blue glow from multiple monitors reflected off her wire-rimmed glasses, casting shifting patterns of light across her concentrated expression. Her employee badge read Equipment Monitor in small, unremarkable text below her name, Sarah Mitchell. Marcus stepped closer, his footsteps echoing against the raised floor tiles that concealed miles of fiber optic cables connecting Apex Defense to classified government networks. The air conditioning hummed with industrial intensity, maintaining the precise temperature required to keep $40 million worth of quantum processors functioning within acceptable parameters. "Ma'am, I need to see your authorization for direct system access," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the particular blend of courtesy and authority that came from 5 years of enforcing security protocols in one of America's most sensitive defense contractors. Sarah's hands paused above the keyboard for exactly 2 seconds before resuming their steady rhythm. Her silence wasn't defiant or dismissive. It carried the weight of someone whose attention was focused on patterns that others might not recognize as significant. The multiple screens before her displayed cascading streams of network traffic data, system logs, and authentication records that would appear as meaningless noise to anyone without specialized training. Behind Marcus, 2 other technicians had stopped their routine maintenance work to observe the developing situation. Jake Morrison, a junior systems analyst fresh from his cybersecurity certification program, exchanged glances with Diana Torres, whose 8 years with the company had taught her to recognize when standard procedures might not apply to situations that seemed routine on the surface. The server room operated as the digital heart of Apex Defense Technologies, processing classified communications for 3 branches of the military and coordinating secure data transfers with allied defense contractors across 14 countries. The raised floor beneath their feet concealed redundant power systems, emergency cooling units, and hardened communication lines that ensured operational continuity even during scenarios that were too sensitive to discuss in congressional budget hearings. Sarah adjusted her position in the ergonomic chair that had been assigned to her workstation 6 months earlier when she'd started what everyone understood to be a low-level monitoring position. Her job description mentioned equipment status verification and routine performance logging, tasks that typically involved checking predetermined metrics and filing reports that few people would ever read carefully. Her worn canvas messenger bag sat beside her feet, unmarked except for coffee stains and the general weathering that suggested extensive daily use. No company laptop, no stack of technical manuals, no visible certification documents that might indicate specialized training beyond the basic requirements listed on her personnel file. The workstation she occupied had been positioned in the corner of the server room, away from the primary control terminals where senior engineers monitored critical defense communications and maintained systems that protected national security infrastructure. Her assigned desk included basic monitoring software, standard productivity applications, and access to equipment status databases that required no special clearance to review. Marcus consulted the tablet he carried, scrolling through access logs and security protocols that governed who could perform which functions within the facility's most sensitive spaces. Sarah Mitchell's clearance level appeared clearly in the system, Level 2, equipment monitoring with specific restrictions that prevented her from accessing network configuration tools or classified data streams. Your current access level doesn't permit direct interaction with these security monitoring systems, Marcus explained, his tone remaining professional despite his growing confusion about why she continued working as if his presence was irrelevant. To her activities, Diana Torres moved closer, her attention drawn by details that didn't align with her expectations about personnel whose responsibilities involved routine equipment checks. The way Sarah positioned herself relative to multiple monitors suggested familiarity with complex data analysis that extended beyond basic status reporting. Her scanning patterns indicated systematic evaluation of information that required understanding. Network architecture and threat assessment methodologies. The screens Sarah monitored displayed authentication logs, network traffic patterns, and system access records in real-time formats that would overwhelm most personnel whose training focused on single system monitoring rather than comprehensive security analysis. Her ability to process multiple data streams simultaneously suggested experience with environments where situational awareness required rapid assessment of information from diverse sources. Jake Morrison noticed that Sarah's workstation configuration had been modified from its standard setup. Additional monitors had been connected through equipment requisitions that someone with appropriate authority had approved, though the documentation for these changes didn't appear in the routine maintenance logs he reviewed weekly. The modifications suggested requirements that extended beyond basic equipment monitoring, indicating someone had determined that her position needed capabilities that weren't reflected in the job description that human resources had provided to her direct supervisor. Marcus realized that Sarah's continued silence and focused concentration on her work created a situation that standard security protocols hadn't anticipated. Her behavior wasn't confrontational or suspicious in ways that would justify immediate action, but it challenged assumptions about authority and clearance levels that formed the foundation of facility security procedures. Around them, the server room continued its constant operation. Cooling fans maintained precise airflow across processor arrays that consumed enough electricity to power a small city. Status lights blinked in patterns that indicated normal function across systems whose interruption would affect military operations. Spanning 3 continents and 4 time zones, Sarah's presence in this environment had become routine over the previous 6 months. But her current activity suggested capabilities that none of her colleagues had previously observed or understood. Apex Defense Technologies occupied 17 acres of hardened facilities in Colorado Springs, positioned strategically between NORAD and the Air Force Academy. The company's primary contract with the Department of Defense involved developing quantum-encrypted communication systems that would protect American military communications from adversaries whose cyber capabilities had evolved beyond traditional defense measures. Dr. Robert Hawkins, Chief Technology Officer, reviewed quarterly security assessments from his corner office overlooking the facility's main research complex. The reports detailed protection systems that had cost $43 million to implement and required constant updating to counter threats that emerged faster than bureaucratic processes could adapt to address them. The quantum processors, housed in Server Room C, represented 5 years of collaborative research between Apex Defense, MET's Computer Science Department, and classified programs whose existence was known only to personnel with clearances above congressional oversight levels. These systems processed communications for Special Operations Command, coordinated satellite surveillance across hostile territories, and maintained secure channels between American forces and allied intelligence services. Each server rack contained processing power that exceeded the computational capabilities available to most nations. The cooling systems alone consumed enough energy to power 3,000 homes, while backup generators could maintain full operational capacity for 72 hours during emergencies that might interrupt civilian power infrastructure. Amanda Foster, Director of Information Security, conducted her morning review of overnight security logs from her workstation in the Security Operations Center. Her team of 12 cybersecurity specialists monitored network traffic patterns, analyzed authentication attempts, and maintained defensive protocols that protected systems containing information whose compromise could affect American strategic advantages that had taken decades to develop. The facility's security measures extended beyond digital protections. Physical access required biometric verification, background investigations updated every 18 months, and psychological evaluations that screened for indicators suggesting personnel might be vulnerable to foreign intelligence recruitment. Employee communications were monitored through systems that analyzed patterns indicating potential security risks, without violating privacy protections that were still respected even in classified environments. Foster's experience included 15 years with the National Security Agency before joining Apex Defense, bringing expertise in threat assessment that had been developed through exposure to adversary capabilities that most Americans would never know existed. Her understanding of cyber warfare included knowledge of state-sponsored attacks that had targeted American infrastructure, economic systems, and military communications with sophistication that required constant vigilance to counter effectively. Morning briefings she prepared for senior leadership would detail overnight activities that included routine maintenance, scheduled system updates, and security scans that had detected no unusual patterns or unauthorized access attempts. The report would note that all personnel had followed established protocols, all systems had maintained operational readiness, and no indicators suggested threats that required immediate attention. In Building 7, the Advanced Research Division conducted experiments with artificial intelligence systems that could identify patterns in enemy communications, predict tactical movements based on logistics data, and coordinate defensive responses across multiple theaters of operation simultaneously. These programs operated under security classifications that required separate clearances beyond those needed for access to other facility areas. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, head of the II research team, supervised algorithms that learned from real combat data provided by military units whose operations couldn't be acknowledged publicly. The artificial intelligence system she developed would eventually protect American forces by identifying threats faster than human analysts could process information. But their current development required access to sensitive data that revealed tactical capabilities and strategic vulnerabilities. The research conducted at Apex Defense influenced military procurement decisions, affecting billions of dollars in equipment purchases, training programs that prepared American forces for conflicts that might emerge without warning, and strategic planning that assumed adversary capabilities were constantly evolving in ways that required technological advantages to maintain security. Technical staff working throughout the facility understood that their daily responsibilities contributed to national defense capabilities that protected civilian populations from threats that most people would never know had been successfully countered. Their expertise ensured that American military communications remained secure despite attempts by foreign intelligence services to intercept information that could compromise operations affecting international stability. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Manufacturing divisions within the facility produced quantum encryption devices that would be installed on naval vessels, aircraft, and ground installations were secure. Communications meant the difference between successful missions and casualties that would dominate news coverage for months. Quality control procedures ensured that each device met specifications that had been refined through testing in combat environments where failure could result in compromised positions and endangered personnel. The cafeteria where employees gathered during breaks buzzed with conversations about technical challenges that couldn't be discussed outside the facility's secured perimeters. Engineers shared problem-solving approaches for issues that required creativity and expertise, developed through years of education and practical experience with systems that pushed the boundaries of current technology. Human resources maintained personnel files that documented background investigations, security clearances, and performance evaluations for 837 employees whose work affected American national security in ways that would never appear in public documentation. Each employee's access to classified information was precisely calibrated based on their specific responsibilities and the minimum clearance levels required to perform their assigned duties effectively. The parking lot outside Building 3 contained vehicles belonging to personnel whose expertise had been recruited from technology companies, academic institutions, and government agencies where they had developed capabilities that were essential for maintaining American technological superiority over adversaries, whose resources and intentions posed ongoing threats to civilian security and international stability. Sarah's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard at exactly 9:47 a.m. The sudden stillness was so pronounced that Diana Torres, who had been calibrating backup power systems 15 feet away, looked up from her diagnostic tablet. In the 6 months since Sarah had started working in Server Room C, Diana had never seen her pause during her morning routine. The multiple monitors surrounding Sarah's workstation displayed what appeared to be routine system logs, but her body language suggested she had discovered something that required immediate attention. Her posture straightened with the kind of alertness that experienced personnel recognized as the precursor to emergency protocols. Though no alarms had sounded and no system warnings appeared on the central monitoring displays, Marcus Chun had returned to his primary workstation after their earlier interaction, but he found himself glancing toward Sarah's corner with increasing frequency. Her behavior pattern had shifted from methodical routine to focused investigation, and he couldn't identify what had triggered the change. The data stream she monitored hadn't produced any obvious anomalies that would explain her sudden concentration on specific elements within the information flow. Sarah opened a notepad application and began typing with deliberate precision. Her note-taking suggested documentation of discoveries that required careful recording, but the content of her observations remained invisible to anyone not positioned directly behind her workstation. The angle of her monitors and the small font sizes she used made it impossible for casual observation to reveal what had captured her attention. Jake Morrison attempted to engage her in conversation, hoping to understand whether she had encountered technical problems that might require assistance from senior staff. "Everything running smoothly over there?" he asked, maintaining the friendly tone that usually encouraged informal communication between colleagues working in shared spaces. Sarah's response came without turning away from her screens. "Systems are operating within normal parameters," she said, her voice carrying none of the concern that her body language suggested she was experiencing. The contradiction between her words and her behavior created cognitive dissonance for personnel trained to identify discrepancies that might indicate security issues requiring immediate escalation. Her typing continued with rhythmic intensity that suggested systematic documentation of patterns or anomalies that weren't immediately obvious to other personnel monitoring the same general network infrastructure. Whatever she had discovered appeared to require detailed analysis that extended beyond the basic equipment status verification that her position description had outlined during her initial orientation. Diana Torres moved closer to Sarah's workstation, under the pretense of checking environmental controls near that section of the server room. From her new position, she could observe that Sarah's attention had focused on authentication logs, access patterns, and timing correlations that wouldn't normally concern someone whose responsibilities involved monitoring hardware performance. Rather than security analysis, the data Sarah examined included user login sequences, file access timestamps, and network traffic patterns that painted a picture of system usage extending far beyond routine operations. Her analysis appeared to involve cross-referencing information from multiple sources in ways that required understanding of network architecture, user behavior analysis, and threat detection methodologies that weren't covered in basic equipment. Monitoring training. Marcus realized that Sarah's current activities violated several security protocols, but her behavior didn't match patterns associated with malicious intent or unauthorized access attempts. Her methodical approach suggested legitimate investigation rather than data theft or system compromise, creating ambiguity about whether immediate intervention was necessary or appropriate. At 10:15 a.m., Sarah printed 3 pages of documentation. Using the secure printer located near the central monitoring station, her movement toward the printer drew attention from all personnel in the server room, as printing activities required justification, according to facility security policies designed to prevent unauthorized removal of sensitive information. The printed materials remained face down as Sarah returned to her workstation, but her purposeful handling suggested the documents contained information that supported conclusions she had reached during her investigation. Her decision to create physical documentation indicated preparation for communication with personnel whose clearance levels might require formal reporting of discoveries that couldn't be discussed through normal channels. Jake Morrison noticed that Sarah's workstation had generated network queries to databases that weren't typically accessed during routine equipment monitoring. The queries appeared in system logs that he reviewed as part of his weekly maintenance responsibilities, but their purpose wasn't clear from the technical parameters that had been recorded. Automatically. The queries had accessed employee databases, security clearance records, and facility access logs that contained information about personnel movements and authorization levels throughout the Apex Defense Complex. Sarah's access to these systems appeared to have been approved through channels that didn't correspond to standard procedures for equipment monitoring positions. Diana Torres observed that Sarah had begun cross-referencing timing data between different systems, creating correlation analyses that would reveal patterns in user behavior, system access, and network traffic that might indicate security issues requiring investigation by personnel with appropriate clearance levels. Her analytical approach demonstrated familiarity with methodologies used in counterintelligence operations rather than routine technical support. The complexity of Sarah's investigation suggested training and experience that extended far beyond the qualifications listed in the personnel records that Marcus had access to review. Her ability to navigate multiple security systems simultaneously indicated clearance levels and technical expertise that weren't reflected in her job description or the informal conversations she had participated in during her 6 months at the facility. Around them, normal operations continued as other personnel performed scheduled maintenance, monitored system performance, and maintained security protocols that protected the facility's most sensitive operations. But Sarah's investigation had introduced an element of uncertainty that challenged assumptions about routine security and the true purpose of personnel whose official responsibilities might not encompass their actual capabilities or mission requirements. Diana Torres felt the first spark of recognition at 10:32 a.m. when she noticed Sarah's screen displaying a pattern analysis interface that she hadn't seen since her advanced training at the FBI's Cybersecurity Operations Center 3 years earlier. The software wasn't available through standard Apex Defense installations, which meant Sarah's workstation had been configured with specialized tools that required authorization from security personnel operating above facility management levels. The realization triggered a cascade of memory fragments from classified briefings Diana had attended during her previous assignment with the Bureau's Counterintelligence Division. Those sessions had covered personnel whose official positions provided cover for investigative activities that couldn't be conducted through normal law enforcement channels, individuals whose expertise in threat detection operated independently of traditional organizational structures. Sarah's methodical documentation process suddenly made sense when viewed through the lens of federal investigation protocols rather than routine equipment monitoring. Her note-taking patterns, systematic cross-referencing of databases, and careful timing of her activities matched procedures Diana had learned for conducting covert security assessments within organizations that might contain compromised personnel. Marcus Chun had been observing Sarah's activities with growing concern about protocol violations, but Diana's sudden change in demeanor caught his attention. The shift in Diana's posture, from casual monitoring to focused observation, suggested recognition of significance that he wasn't equipped to understand. Her experience with federal cybersecurity operations had provided exposure to scenarios that weren't covered in corporate security training programs. "Marcus," Diana said quietly, moving closer to the senior network administrator while maintaining visual contact with Sarah's workstation. Her voice carried the particular weight that experienced personnel used when sharing information that might prevent colleagues from making decisions with consequences they couldn't anticipate. "That analysis software she's running isn't part of our standard toolkit," Diana continued, keeping her explanation brief while ensuring Marcus understood the implications. "It's designed for counterintelligence operations, not equipment monitoring. Someone with appropriate authority has provided her with capabilities that suggest her actual mission extends beyond what we've been told." The recognition crystallized as Diana accessed memories from briefings about embedded investigators whose presence within defense contractors provided early warning about security threats that couldn't be detected through automated systems or routine audits. These personnel operated with clearances that superseded normal facility hierarchies, conducting assessments that influenced national security decisions at levels that most employees would never encounter. Marcus reviewed his mental catalog of interactions with Sarah during her 6 months at Apex Defense, searching for details that would support Diana's assessment. Her arrival at the facility had been handled through human resources channels that seemed routine at the time, but her workstation setup had required equipment modifications that someone with significant authority had approved without explanation. Specialized monitors, enhanced network access, and database permissions that Sarah's position had received made sense when viewed as tools for conducting comprehensive security analysis rather than basic equipment monitoring. Her assignment to Server Room C provided access to network traffic patterns, user behavior data, and system logs that would reveal indicators of insider threats or foreign intelligence operations. Jake Morrison had been listening to the conversation between Diana and Marcus with increasing awareness that his understanding of facility operations was incomplete. His cybersecurity training had covered theoretical scenarios involving embedded investigators, but his practical experience hadn't prepared him to recognize when such operations were being conducted within his workplace. Sarah's behavior during the previous 3 hours represented a textbook example of covert threat assessment. Her systematic analysis of authentication logs, correlation of user access patterns, and documentation of timing anomalies followed methodologies that were designed to identify personnel whose activities might indicate compromise by foreign intelligence, services, or other security threats. Diana realized that Sarah's investigation had likely uncovered evidence of the kind of insider threat that required immediate escalation to personnel with clearances above facility management levels. Her decision to create printed documentation suggested preparation for communication with federal agencies whose involvement couldn't be discussed through normal corporate channels. The complexity of Sarah's analysis indicated months of preparation and data collection that had been conducted while maintaining the appearance of routine equipment monitoring. Her ability to conduct this investigation without detection by facility security systems demonstrated expertise in operational security that came from training at agencies whose existence operated above public awareness levels. Marcus began to understand that his earlier attempts to enforce security Protocols had inadvertently interfered with a federal investigation that was being conducted to protect national security interests. Sarah's continued focus on her work despite his challenges indicated authorization that superseded his administrative authority within the facility's security hierarchy. The printed documents Sarah had created likely contained evidence of security violations that could affect military operations, intelligence gathering capabilities, or technological advantages that were essential for maintaining American strategic superiority over adversaries whose capabilities were constantly evolving. Her investigation represented the kind of proactive threat detection that prevented security breaches from escalating into national security crises. Diana's recognition of the situation carried immediate understanding of appropriate responses to authority that operated independently of normal corporate structures, while remaining essential for protecting the effectiveness of those structures. Her experience with federal operations had taught her to recognize when standard procedures should be suspended in favor of supporting activities that served larger security objectives around them. The server room continued its normal operations, while containing an investigation that most personnel weren't cleared to understand fully. Sarah's presence had introduced a level of security analysis that operated beyond routine threat detection, ensuring that American defense capabilities remained protected from insider threats that could compromise decades of technological development and strategic planning. The quantum processors, communication systems, and artificial intelligence research that filled the facility represented investments that adversary intelligence services would consider high-value targets worthy of sophisticated infiltration attempts. Sarah's investigation ensured that such attempts would be detected and countered before they could affect operations that protected American interests spanning multiple continents and strategic partnerships. At 11:14 a.m., Sarah Mitchell reached for her secure phone and dialed a number that bypassed Apex Defense's standard communication systems. Diana Torres recognized the device immediately, a hardened satellite phone used by federal agents when standard networks couldn't guarantee operational security. The call connected after 2 rings. "This is Agent Mitchell, badge number 7749. Sarah said, her voice carrying the professional clarity that came from years of conducting investigations where precise communication could determine mission success or failure. "I have confirmation of insider threat activity within Apex Defense Technologies. Requesting immediate coordination with facility security leadership." The transformation in Sarah's demeanor was instantaneous and complete. The quiet equipment monitor disappeared, replaced by a federal investigator whose authority commanded immediate attention from anyone with appropriate security clearance to understand the implications of her presence. Her posture, voice, and communication patterns revealed training that came from agencies whose operations protected national security through methods that weren't discussed in public forums. Diana Torres felt the pieces clicking into place with crystalline clarity. Sarah Mitchell was a deep cover investigator from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, assigned to conduct long-term surveillance of personnel within defense contractors whose access to classified information made them high-value targets for foreign intelligence recruitment. Her 6-month assignment had provided comprehensive access to employee behavior patterns, system usage data, and security protocols that would reveal indicators of compromise that automated systems couldn't detect. Marcus Chun realized that every interaction he'd had with Sarah during the previous months had been carefully orchestrated to maintain her cover while gathering intelligence about facility operations and personnel. Her apparent unfamiliarity with standard procedures had been deliberate misdirection, designed to encourage personnel to explain security protocols and reveal information about system vulnerabilities that might be exploited by hostile actors. Within minutes of Sarah's phone call, elevator access throughout Building 7 required special authorization as facility security. implemented lockdown procedures that had been developed for scenarios involving confirmed security threats. Amanda Foster, Director of Information Security, received notification that federal agents were en route to coordinate response to an insider threat that had been detected through ongoing counterintelligence operations. The printed documentation Sarah had prepared contained detailed evidence of unauthorized access patterns that revealed systematic data extraction over a period of 4 months. The insider threat had been conducted by someone with legitimate clearance levels who had used their authorized access to gather information about quantum encryption algorithms, artificial intelligence research, and satellite communication protocols that could compromise American military capabilities if shared with adversary intelligence services. Dr. Robert Hawkins received a secure communication from Washington, directing him to provide complete cooperation with federal investigators who would be arriving within 2 hours to conduct interviews and secure evidence related to the insider threat. His quarterly security assessments had failed to detect the compromise because the unauthorized activities had been conducted by personnel whose access appeared legitimate according to standard monitoring protocols. Sarah's investigation had uncovered correlation patterns between employee access logs and external communication, attempts that indicated coordination with foreign contacts. The insider had been careful to avoid obvious security violations, but their systematic gathering of information from multiple classified programs revealed intent to compromise national security for purposes that served adversary interests rather than legitimate research or operational requirements. The specialized analysis software on Sarah's workstation had been designed specifically for detecting the kind of subtle behavioral patterns that indicated foreign intelligence recruitment. Her months of patient observation had documented timing, correlations, access patterns, and communication behaviors that painted a comprehensive picture of espionage activities that threatened decades of technological development and strategic planning. Jake Morrison learned that his routine maintenance activities had inadvertently provided Sarah with additional data points about system vulnerabilities and security protocols that informed her investigation. His cooperation, though unknowing, had contributed to building the case against personnel whose compromise could have affected military operations across multiple theaters of operation. Federal agents from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division began arriving at the facility at 11:47 a.m., coordinating with Sarah to execute simultaneous arrests and evidence collection that would prevent the insider threat from destroying documentation or alerting foreign handlers about the compromise of their intelligence operation. Their response demonstrated institutional preparation for scenarios that required rapid coordination between multiple agencies. The insider threat had been identified as Dr. Kevin Bradley, a senior researcher in the Advanced AI Division whose access to machine learning algorithms and combat data had provided opportunities to gather information that could revolutionize adversary capabilities in electronic warfare and tactical coordination. His recruitment by foreign intelligence had occurred gradually over 18 months through financial incentives and personal relationships that exploited vulnerabilities identified through sophisticated psychological profiling. Sarah's evidence included documentation of Bradley's unauthorized access to classified databases, correlation between his system activities and external communication attempts, and behavioral analysis that revealed patterns consistent with espionage training provided by hostile intelligence services. Her investigation had prevented the compromise of information that could have affected American military superiority for decades. The coordinated response involved securing Bradley's workstation, interviewing personnel who had worked closely with him, and conducting forensic analysis of systems he had access to determine the full scope of information that might have been compromised. Sarah's 6 months of covert observation had provided federal agencies with comprehensive understanding of the threat before it could achieve strategic significance. throughout the facility, personnel learned that their workplace had been protected by security measures that operated beyond their awareness, ensuring that American technological advantages remain secure despite sophisticated attempts by foreign intelligence services to compromise classified research and development programs that were essential for maintaining national defense capabilities. 3 weeks after Dr. Kevin Bradley's arrest, Agent Sarah Mitchell stood in the same corner of Server Room C where her investigation had begun. But now her true identity was known to the facility's senior leadership. Her equipment monitoring workstation had been replaced with a permanent counterintelligence analysis center, staffed by a rotating team of federal investigators, whose presence would ensure ongoing protection against future insider threats. The forensic analysis of Bradley's activities revealed the sophisticated nature of his espionage operation. Over 14 months, he had systematically photographed classified documents using a modified smartphone camera, transmitted encrypted data through seemingly innocent social media communications, and coordinated with foreign handlers who had provided him with advanced tradecraft training that nearly escaped detection by conventional security measures. Director Amanda Foster reviewed the comprehensive damage assessment that federal investigators had completed during their 3-week investigation. Bradley's unauthorized access had compromised quantum encryption algorithms that would have taken American forces 5 years to develop through legitimate research channels, artificial intelligence training data that revealed tactical capabilities across multiple combat scenarios, and satellite communication protocols that protected special operations command missions in hostile territories. The intelligence Bradley had gathered could have enabled adversary forces to intercept American military communications, predict tactical movements based on logistical patterns, and develop countermeasures against weapon systems that represented decades of technological advancement. His recruitment represented the kind of strategic intelligence operation that hostile nations invested years developing because success could shift military balance across entire regions. Agent Mitchell's patient investigation had prevented what federal prosecutors would later describe as one of the most significant potential compromises of American defense technology since the atomic bomb project. Her ability to detect subtle behavioral patterns that automated security systems missed had protected national security interests that extended far beyond the specific programs housed at Apex Defense Technologies. The methodology she had employed during her 6-month assignment became the foundation for new counterintelligence protocols implemented across 47 defense contractors whose work affected American military capabilities. Her techniques for correlating seemingly unrelated data points, identifying timing patterns that revealed coordination with external contacts, and maintaining operational security while conducting covert investigation were incorporated into federal training programs. Dr. Robert Hawkins discovered that Agent Mitchell's assessment had identified 7 additional personnel whose behavior patterns suggested vulnerability to foreign recruitment, though none had crossed the threshold into active espionage. Analysis enabled preemptive security counseling and enhanced monitoring that would prevent future compromise attempts from succeeding against individuals whose clearance levels provided access to sensitive information. The artificial intelligence research that Bradley had attempted to steal was relocated to more secure facilities, whose access was restricted to personnel who had undergone enhanced background investigations, including polygraph examinations and psychological evaluations designed to identify indicators suggesting foreign intelligence vulnerability. The quantum encryption programs received additional layers of compartmentalized security that prevented any single individual from accessing complete technical specifications. Diana Torres learned that her recognition of Agent Mitchell's true role had been noted in federal personnel records, leading to recruitment opportunities with agencies whose missions required personnel with her combination of technical expertise and operational awareness. Her ability to identify covert federal operations demonstrated analytical capabilities that were valuable for protecting American interests in environments where threats weren't always obvious to personnel without specialized training. Marcus Chun received commendation from facility leadership for his professional handling of the situation once Agent Mitchell's authority had been revealed. His adherence to security protocols, even when faced with circumstances that didn't match standard procedures, had protected both the investigation's operational security and the facility's overall security posture during a period when insider threat activity was actively occurring. The server room where Agent Mitchell had conducted her investigation continued operating as the digital nerve center of Apex Defense Technologies, but with enhanced security measures that reflected lessons learned from the Bradley case. Additional monitoring systems tracked correlation patterns between employee behavior and external communications, while new protocols required justification for access to multiple classified databases within short time periods. Jake Morrison's role in facility security was expanded to include coordination with federal investigators whose ongoing presence provided enhanced protection against sophisticated espionage attempts. His technical expertise, combined with new training in threat detection methodologies, contributed to security capabilities that operated beyond traditional corporate security measures, while maintaining operational efficiency necessary for defense research and development. The quantum processors, artificial intelligence systems, and communication technologies that filled Apex Defense continued advancing American military capabilities, but now with security measures informed by understanding of how adversary intelligence services attempted to compromise such programs. Agent Mitchell's investigation had provided insights into foreign intelligence tradecraft that influenced protection strategies across the defense industrial base. 6 months later, Agent Mitchell received the intelligence community's highest award for counterintelligence operations, though the ceremony occurred in a classified setting where her achievement could be recognized by personnel whose own service protected American interests through methods that couldn't be acknowledged publicly. Her success demonstrated that protecting national security required patience, analytical expertise, and the ability to recognize patterns that others might dismiss as routine. The insider threat network that Bradley had been part of was dismantled through coordinated operations involving multiple agencies, preventing similar compromises at other defense contractors where foreign intelligence had attempted to recruit personnel with access to classified information. Agent Mitchell's investigation had initiated a cascade of security improvements that strengthened American technological advantages across multiple domains of military competition. Her story became required study material at federal training facilities, where new counterintelligence officers learned that protecting national security sometimes required years of patient observation, meticulous analysis, and the professional discipline to maintain cover while conducting investigations that could affect the strategic balance between nations whose competition played out in spaces most citizens would never see. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.